All right, let's take a look at what we have going on now. If I press play on my game, my character falls. I can walk back and forth. The character falls to the ground. And we don't have the character following him, so let's just quickly right click in our scene and go to, well, I think we're going to have to add our Cinemachine. So go to Window, and let me move this out of the way. You can't see it, but it's my recording dongle package manager. I just want you guys to type in CINE and go to look for Cinemachine right here, this guy. Make sure that it's installed. I'm going to pause my video and let that install. All right, and then what I'm going to do here is just close this out now that I know it's installed and it says remove, and I'm going to right click and I'll have a Cinemachine option here. And I'm just going, you see you have targeted cameras here. I'm going to do a 2D camera. And now you could see that my view has updated to this 2D camera. Now, with the Cinemachine camera selected, you could see there's nothing. There's all of this other good stuff inside of here. If you could see tracking target. If I select my player here and I drop it in there, it snaps to the center of where my player is. You can see there's a camera distance, so I can zoom in and out. And now when I press play and I look inside my scene here, you can see the camera has a really nice follow through, so it feels more like a 2D. Now I can't get out of this pit because essentially if I hit spacebar, it just doesn't work that way. I don't have jump scripted. So let's work on another thing, which is if I walk forward here and I go back, I'd like my character to face the other direction. So all I'm going to do really is, you have our character here. I'm just going to adjust the scale -1 and then +1. Right, so inside of our update here, we have a run here. I'm going to hit Control D, and then I'm just going to type flip sprite here. And then I'm going to hit Control and period, and I'm going to have it create that method for me. So on update, it's always going to check this flip sprite method to see if we've gotten input in, and the input is either left or right, essentially, and that's going to flip our sprite. All right, so the first thing I want to do is access my transform component here. So I'm going to type in transform here. Then I want to know what its local scale is. That's the scale here. So I'm going to hit dot and type in local scale. And I'm going to make this equal to a new vector 2, because really all we need is the really just this x or y or whatever we're doing, only two things. And the vector 2 here that I'm looking for is, I want to get the mathf dot sign. Now you might be like, well, what does that mean? If I'm moving, remember I have a -1 here. The negative is the sign, or the +1 is the sign. So what I'm doing here is I want to know what that new sign is, or what the sign is of this value as my character's moving. Because if it's currently -1, I want to make it +1 if I'm moving the other direction when I hit the key. Now the way I can do that is by just getting essentially the rigid body velocity. So if you remember, we have this rigid body 2D and we have it called RGB 2D. And if we go down here, you can see we have rigid body dot linear velocity dot y. So I can actually just grab this, and what I'm looking for actually is the x-axis, right, to flip it. So let's grab this code here, and inside of here, I'm going to paste it, and I'm just going to hit .ix, and what this is going to give me is whatever the current sign is, .x. Now we're getting an error because, remember, I'm doing a vector 2 and we only have one coordinate here. So this is the x coordinate that we're doing. So let's go ahead, and you can see it says x here. I'm just going to put a comma and a 0 because we don't need the y, and that should get rid of that error. So let's save that. Actually, I don't want to make that 0. Now that I look at it, I want to make it 1 because we have a 1 value here. So let me zoom out just a little bit. Hopefully this isn't too small for you. All right, so we have our flip sprite here, and we want to call this based on essentially the movement, right? And if we go all the way to the top here, you got to remember we have this move input variable here, and we have like move input, and this is like bringing in that stuff. See, let's test this. It should work right now. So I'm going to go ahead and press play. And really, you could, if you like this part of your game, like see how it flips back when I'm holding the left mouse? or I'm going to the right and then I'm holding the left mouse button and I release it, it snaps back. I don't want that. I want them to keep facing that direction in case there's a character with a dialogue system or something that I want to add onto this. Now, the reason why that's happening is because if you look at our logic here for our flip sprite here, what it's doing is it's treating 0 as a positive, right? Because what we're doing is if we type in 0 here for the scale, it's actually just considering it to be essentially the same direction, because 0 is it's considering it positive, even though it is, essentially nothing or negative value. So we need to fix that inside of our flip sprite method here. So let's create a Boolean variable here. And this Boolean variable is just going to check if our player has, horizontal speed. And we're going to make this equal to essentially the absolute value of this rigid body dot x. So I'm going to do mathf dot absolute value. And what absolute value returns to you is the So I don't want you to get afraid, just to show you that this is very similar to just typing if the movement is greater than 0. I'll just type that in, hit Control S to save it to show you that that works. And that really, this is just more of a fine tuning thing. This is just for the people who are a little bit afraid of math. So you can see I'm moving to the right, I'm moving to the left, and it still works. But just trust me, use this epsilon. It'll give you a little bit more fine tuning over the math in your code. I think that's good for this one. And the next one we'll keep looking more at we have this really nice walk animation about hooking up that walk. Actually, we're only at 7 minutes. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's hook this animation up in this video. So if you recall, we have an animator here, and inside of this we have an idle to walk. And what I'd like to do is trigger this is walking based on the code itself. Ideally, when you go to refactor this, you always want to have this in its own code. So if you do type in the code just in this player controller platformer, it's completely fine. But you'll have to spend time later refactoring it, because anytime there's a change of thought in your coding or your programming, you always want to create a new script. All right, so let's take a look at our player here. Remember, if we press play here, we're stuck in idle mode, right? And if I go to my animator component here and I turn on is walking, you can see now our player is walking. See that? And then when I uncheck it, it goes back to idle. So what I have to do is I have to actually access this animator component, which is here, which is storing this animator object here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just duplicate this and then just make this a animator component. And then I'm just going to change this to anim. And then I'm going to copy this. No, let's see. Oh, we don't want to store any mathematical value. That's not how this thing works. We are just using this to grab the component for our animator here. So inside of start, I'm going to duplicate this, click anim, and don't forget to change the animator inside of here too. I know I'm going to get some messages, hopefully not, that people are like, oh gosh, why is my animator not working? Why am I getting this error? And it's because you forgot to switch this out. Because this is a variable that's storing a reference to this animator so we can use it. This is actually getting the component that's on here, that's the animator. And as always, what I like to do to show you how this works, I'll make this a serialized field, and I'll save this, and I'll go back into Unity, and we'll open up this player controller script here. And you can see we have an empty slot here for the animator, but when I press play, it actually grabs the component, and it's going to say player, referencing this player. The component that we're grabbing is the animator component here. All right, so that I don't clutter my Unity interface too much, I'm going to save this. And we have this component now, so let's scroll down and let's use it. All right, so you might be wondering, well, where are we going to use it? Well, we're going to use it right here. we have the run movement. And so when we press the key, remember, input is always checking if run is being pressed. And here's our run. And we have our move input logic here, which is getting that info. And then we have the run animation here, right? Where we're getting the player's velocity and stuff. So if we go to the animator here and you click in is walking, I should name this is running. Let me hit Control RR on this and just name it walking, because our character isn't really running. And that's walking. And then I'm going to click anim dot set bool. And what is the boolean that I want to set? Well, this is a string of letters, and it's not animator, it's is walking. So I'm going to double click this, copy it, paste it inside of here. And what I want to do is I want to set this to true. So I can save that. And now if I press play, let's test this. Let's go back to our game window. Let's press play. Right off the bat, my character is starting to walk. And the reason for that is because if you remember, our walking animate is called immediately, and then it calls all of this stuff. So we need to actually tell it to set it to true if our key is pressed, right? So we have this, if player has horizontal speed, we can maybe call walking from there instead of update. Another way of doing it is we have this true false variable here that's checking whether we are, this boolean is set to true if we're actually adding any sort of velocity or we're moving that's greater than or 0 here, right? That means that we're actually moving. So remember, this is used to flip our sprite. So we're always kind of moving. So I'm going to copy this. And this is just, again, checking if we have any sort of positive value that is greater than 0. So if I copy this and I actually go down to my walking and I just paste this here above this guy, and then what I can do is I can just grab this value and then just use it here. Because remember, if we're pressing our A or D key, our value is set to greater than the value there. That means we're moving. And so we could set walking to true. So now when I press play, you can see if we're not pressing anything, we're going to be stuck in our idle state. And let me dock my animator next to it so you guys can see that kind of in action. Now if I press it, you can see it moves to walk and it goes back, right? Because if this becomes a true or false switch. So now my character is walking and it goes back and forth to this idle state. You can see that it keeps switching between it, which is pretty nice. So that's just a different way of doing it. Instead of doing an if check, you can do it this way, which is another nice clean way of writing code. I kind of like if you want to make a method, because this is being used in 2 spaces, you could make another method called isMoving or something, and you could just leave that in there and then have that method return a Boolean value, and then you can use that over and over again instead of having to copy the same code. So that's another way of kind of refactoring or cleaning up your code. But this works fine. It's a small game. All right, I think that's good for this lesson. We'll look at jumping so that we're not trapped or climbing out. Maybe we could have it like he jumps on a box and then he can climb out, and then you guys can build out more of a level, or we'll build out maybe more of a level together later.